to watch leaders make bad decisions. Herod made one bad decision after another. Now, first he married the wrong woman, right? Now, I'm not making a value judgment on Herodias, though I could. But she was already married to Herod's brother. But Herod was the king, and the king got whatever he wanted. And Herod wanted Herodias. And it kind of looks like Herodias was into the idea of the power that she would get by being the wife of the king. And so they got married. That was mistake number one. Then Herod made a promise that he shouldn't have. Now, Herod must have been a man of passion over intellect. Heart over head. He got so wrapped up in his celebration of his birthday that he promised his daughter Herodias anything that she wanted for the dance that she just performed. Now, what kind of person can promise anything for something like a dance? Anything. It would have to be someone who gets whatever they want, whenever they want, without any problem, in order to be able to promise anything, even if it's the death of someone. That's mistake number two. Herod was full of himself. Now, it isn't really determined if Herodias, the wife, was named Herodias before she married Herod. It could be that her first husband, Philip, was actually named Herod Philip, and because his whole family wanted to carry the name of Herod the Great, otherwise known as the one who killed all of the infants in order to kill Jesus before he could become king. That's Herod the Great. But it also is possible that she was renamed Herodias to carry Herod's name and the power of Herod's name, for his ego or for her own. And then they named their daughter Herodias too. Big egos, right? Very big, and must have been confusing in that household. So Herod makes the mistake of promising the moon. And then he makes the mistake of carrying it through. He made the promise in front of the big dogs of society, the political and military leaders, the elite of society. And he couldn't go back on his promise and look like he didn't have the power that he claimed to have. He couldn't admit that perhaps he spoke without thinking it through. He certainly couldn't admit fault. And so he doubled down. He said, "Bring me the head of John the Baptist right now." The world could have been so different. This passage makes it pretty clear that Herod was intrigued by John. That there was something about John that Herod just was drawn to. It said that Herod respected John. And maybe it's because John stood up to him. I imagine that didn't happen very often in Herod's life. Who's going to stand up to the king and risk prison or death? But John did. John told Herod that he messed up when he married Herodias, which, of course, Herodias didn't like very much, because how dare John call her a mistake? But Herod respected John for some reason. He saw holiness in John, Scripture says. He listened to John. He didn't understand what John was trying to tell him all the time, but he listened to him. And I have to wonder, what would the world be like if he kept on listening to John? Because he might not have understood John, because John was telling him that he couldn't have whatever he wanted. And you can't do whatever you want, even if you are a king. And that would have been a foreign concept to Herod. Because he got everything that he wanted all his life. He did whatever he wanted all his life. Limits? What limits? I'm the leader of the world. But he listened to John. So what if John kept chipping away at this? What if John were able to make Herod see that he shouldn't live without limits? That other people actually matter in this life? This Herod, he's the one that made the decision not to save Jesus. In Luke 23, when Jesus is put on trial, Pilate sends Jesus to Herod so that Herod can take care of him. And Herod saw it as an opportunity to see a show. Herod had been wanting to meet Jesus because he'd heard about the miracles that Jesus had done. And so he says to Jesus, show me a miracle. I want a miracle. Give me one right now. Perform for me, monkey. Which is exactly what a spoiled king would do, right? How different would this world be if John had kept chipping away at Herod's ego? I think that maybe Herod wanted to meet Jesus in the first place because he really wanted to be a religious man. Because the Spirit had been working on him through John. And with a little more time and a little more vulnerability, maybe the outcome with Jesus would have been different. Maybe Herod would be the hero that saved Jesus from crucifixion rather than the puppet that did nothing of consequence. This man that desperately wanted to be great, whose ego demanded that he be great, turned out to be nothing, really. History is not kind to this man. And there's a lesson here for us. Because we get to choose our leaders. And that wasn't true in Herod's time. Herod became the leader simply because he was born into it, born into his position. He didn't earn it, he didn't work for it, he had it handed to him. We get to choose our leaders. And in most aspects of our lives, we get to do this. We choose our political leaders, and yes, the ones that are elected may not be the ones that we wanted, depending on the season, but we as a nation, we choose them together. And so we must choose wisely. Because the decisions of our leaders that they make, they have consequences, they matter. And we must be careful to put good people in office who will use the right mixture of head and heart to make good decisions. But we also choose the leaders in our lives. We choose the friends that influence us. We choose the media that influences us. We choose the TV programs and the music that shapes us and the books that we read. We choose the things that we put into our minds and our hearts that will shape who we are and how we live. So choose wisely. And we are leaders as well. We are all leaders in some way. We influence others. We have an influence on our friends or our co-workers, our families, our children, and our grandchildren. And the way that we make decisions will shape the way that those around us, those that look up to us, make decisions as well. And the one thing that we can absolutely control is whether we let our egos get the best of us. Or can we admit when we make a mistake and learn from them? Because it's not the mistake that's so detrimental. It's the way that we deal with it that is. I started the day by talking about my first car. Now, in the scheme of things, that wasn't that big of a deal. I say this because I had that car for like a year before someone rear-ended me and I had to get another car. And the next time I bought a car, though, I got to tell you, I thought long and hard about it. I did more research. I used my head as much as my heart, and because I learned from my first mistake. Good leaders admit their mistakes and they learn from them. Ask successful people if they've ever made a mistake, and they'll tell you that they've all failed. The important thing is to learn from that failure. And God knows this too. That's why there's grace. God has built in a way to allow us to fail and still be okay. Sometimes we call that confession. So as leaders who want to be learners and not hiders of our mistakes, let's practice confession this morning. I will suggest some areas where we might confess, and then I'm going to pause, and I'm going to give you time to confess to God silently. It's just you that has to know what you're confessing. But do it, okay? And at the end, we will be forgiven, which is awesome. We don't have to be leaders who never admit their mistakes. We don't have to be leaders that never fail. We can be leaders that rely on God to lead us through our failures So let's do that together. You know, God sees us as holy and blameless. Looking through the eyes of grace, that's what God sees. To live with that truth, we must look at the things that we would rather hide. So in the silence, look now at the hurt that you have caused and that you have felt, and forgive. Look at the greed, the hate, the jealousy, the laziness, the neglect, the lies. Be honest with God and with yourself.